Many of the supply chain issues we're facing today existed before the pandemic. Unfortunately, the pandemic have dramatically amplified and further complicated all of our supply chain issues over the last 2 years. So regarding the supply chain disruptions that a lot of our members are facing and those around the world, it's really death by a thousand cuts. So we're layering, ongoing, and compounding the supply chain disruptions. As many people know, fresh produce is a just-in-time delivery. And because of the highly perishable nature of our product, any disruption to our supply chain means a significant loss. And so when we see waste due to quality, waste due to longer delivery times, it is extremely, extremely challenging to our system. But relative to the pandemic, when we start looking at health restrictions, we start looking at labor shortages, port delays, trucking shortages, container shortages, global supply chain logistic issues, the rising cost of inputs, challenges related to climate that are impacted in Canada in the last year, floods and wildfires. All of these have compounded the challenges that we've been trying to deal with on a macro level across the country. But if we want to narrow it down as to the real challenge, labor is the primary issue. And undoubtedly, the single most important piece to our entire puzzle.
Look, there's three issues here that will be equally affecting Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere producers, not only of fruit, but of food in general at the moment. And that is global shortages of labour, shipping and logistics challenges, and of course, the geopolitics of the moment. In our region and in our industry, in the apple industry, we rely very, very heavily on both permanent New Zealand workers, but also seasonal workers, backpackers, and in particular in the apple and pear industry with our recognised seasonal employer scheme in the Pacific Islands, principally Vanuatu, Tonga and Samoa. Now, as your audience will have seen in recent months, obviously Omicron has finally reached this part of the world. We've done a very good job of keeping it out for a long, long time, but it now has reached this part of the world. And we are having to deal with significant disruption as a result in what the audiences would have heard, would have experienced earlier in the pandemic back in 2020, 2021. So we have skill shortages across key roles, key areas. We have a massive exodus. We had a massive exodus of all our backpackers. We had at a peak almost 50,000 backpackers working holiday visa schemes who would have been an important part of our picking of our fruit. They are pretty much no longer here. And on top of that, I was at a meeting last week with growers down south where shipping and logistics, they said the labour issues and challenges pale in significance compared with the shipping and logistics challenges that they are facing. And obviously the global inflationary environment, increased costs, and then on top of that, you layer the geopolitics of the moment, and really we're only scratching the surfaces of what the secondary impacts of that might be with food for the world in terms of the production of things like wheat coming out of it. Obviously fuel's the obvious one, but also things like wheat coming out of both Russia and Ukraine and how that's going to impact.
Bueno, ojalá no hubiésemos tenido la oportunidad de ver lo que está sucediendo en Ucrania, que es un tema bastante complejo, que yo diría es el menos importante desde el punto de vista de los efectos, es mucho más importante desde el punto de vista, evidentemente, de la situación mundial. Es una guerra entre países importantes, por lo tanto, nos tiene que preocupar. Independientemente de ello, el efecto específico de lo que pasa con Ucrania o en Ucrania no es tan perjudicial para nuestro país, pero sí, obviamente, todo lo que ha sucedido en los últimos años respecto de la situación médica, lo que ha sucedido con la pandemia y todos sus efectos, que ha sido, a nuestro juicio, el efecto o el problema más grande que hemos podido sufrir desde el punto de vista del sector. En mis 35 años de actividad con la Asociación de Exportadores de Frutas de Chile, yo diría que es la primera vez que vemos que está realmente amenazado el sector, afectado por muchas circunstancias. No es solamente un problema de los efectos económicos que se producen, sino que también los efectos del punto de vista de la logística, del punto de vista de la falta de trabajadores, desde el punto de vista, obviamente, también de todo lo que significa desde el punto de vista de los precios que han subido, de las materias primas, pero también de los alimentos en general. Pero todo ello no logra compensar a su vez lo que está sucediendo a nivel de el transporte, no solamente el tema logístico, que es un problema muy complejo desde el punto de vista que a veces no hay barcos para que vayan a un determinado país. Nosotros dependemos fundamentalmente de nuestro comercio exterior, no solamente como país, sino que también como sector frutícola. Y eso, la verdad que es un tema tremendamente serio, muy grave. Lo que se produce a nivel de los puertos, además se agrega la falta de contenedores y los precios que han subido respecto de los fletes en una forma absolutamente desmedida a nuestro juicio y que tiene que evidentemente ser subsanado de alguna manera.
Exports. We export 8% of all our fresh fruit to Russia. And the majority, 20% of our fares go to Russia. So obviously, these logistics disruptions do have a serious impact for us, both in terms of logistics, payments, and also credit insurance. The total South African exports 3.4 million tons of fresh fruit per annum to about 90 countries. So with this fruit not being able to be shipped to Russia, that fruit intended for Russia cannot be diverted to all markets because of different specifications and standards, with the result that a lot of fruit end up in other markets. Adding on to this, South Africa does not have access to all the markets, especially in the east, and we also cannot ship fruit destined for Russia to Europe. So that leaves us in a predicament with regards to options and then income back to the exporter and to the producer right at the farm gate.
I think the biggest point comes back into making fresh produce essential, number one. The second piece comes into making sure we have the right regulatory tools in place to address key issues, whether it's the shipping lines, whether it's our ports, and how do we reduce the congestion and challenges of accessing containers and other tools to move product through the system. Global coalition can contextualize the global debate. And this is fundamental. I mentioned about the economic, the social, and the environmental. So the global coalition can take that focus and look at the sustainability, the health, the global nutrition, how COVID-19 and its current impacts have been impacting our global fruit and vegetable community, and how we can work together to try and focus and raise attention around some of these core challenges, especially with key global stakeholders, whether that's WHO, WTO, with the Global Shipping Council, and focus our issues in a common message. In the end, it's all about one common approach, and that's ensuring that the value of fresh fruit and vegetables as a public good is recognized and that we can ensure that we deliver fresh, quality, and safe food to the public around the world.
If we can start to think about how we can more closely collaborate across oceans and across borders on some of these issues, I think, you know, if I use the RSE example that I used before, working with the Pacific, we're doing that because it's a win-win. We win because we get our fruit picked, and obviously our growers like that. The islands win because they get remittances coming back into their countries, valuable remittances. You know, they've been smashed by tourism. Tourism hasn't been to the Pacific Islands for the last 2 years. So, you know, their economies, you know, they live and breathe on their tourism remittances. So if we can start to think about how we can create win-wins across oceans and across borders, that is how we will advance, I think, in this discussion.
Buscar soluciones a nivel mundial es tremendamente importante. Por ejemplo, impuestos. Los impuestos deberían, ojalá, suspenderse por algún tiempo. Cualquier tipo de impuesto que afecte al sector, que es un sector tremendamente importante desde el punto de vista de la alimentación, que la ayuda con que nosotros estamos a su vez ayudando respecto a la alimentación mundial, también eso tiene que ser reconocido desde el punto de vista de que tenemos que tener algunas facilidades momentáneas para poder seguir actuando desde el punto de vista de lo que hacemos como beneficio para los consumidores en general. Ahí tenemos, si por algún lado hay excesivos costos, también ojalá los gobiernos puedan crear algún tipo de compensación, algún subsidio transitorio con el objeto de, en definitiva, lograr un cierto equilibrio con que debe la economía siempre comportarse, un equilibrio entre todas las partes. Hoy tenemos desajustes, tenemos exigencias, desajustes, aprovechamientos, todo eso tiene que terminar y evidentemente trabajar para que no tengamos que posteriormente, en un tiempo más, sufrir las consecuencias de no tener, por ejemplo, suficiente abastecimiento a nivel mundial de frutas y hortalizas, por ejemplo, o de cualquier otro producto, dado que los efectos que se han producido son tan deteriorantes que eliminan algunos sectores de poder seguir proveyendo de alimentos al mundo.
Firstly, it would be access to more markets. As I've said previously, we don't have access to quite a lot of markets, especially in the East, so we need to expedite those processes again on ministerial level with our government and between those governments, the National Plant Protection Organizations. Secondly, on the logistics side, again, to get our ports running more efficiently, also looking at the cost increases, how can that be absorbed and or softened in a way? Associations such as SHAFFE can play a very important role because it does have the credibility. So to address on behalf of its members all the issues that are cross-cutting, affecting all the SHAFFE members, because SHAFFE members are competitors, but there are also matters where they need to be involved on a collective level, such as the EU Green Deal, plastics, etc. And as I've mentioned, shipping lines, other logistics issues. So yes, there is a definite role for an association such as SHAFFE on all levels.